Hello, I'm Brian O'Driscoll, a Senior Advisor with Teneo, the global CEO advisory firm, and I am delighted to welcome you to episode 2 of Teneo's Voices in Leadership series. Now, in this series, I'm sitting down with senior leaders to reflect on their career journeys and learn from their perspectives on a wide range of topics. Today, I'm joined by Frances Fitzgerald, a former Tánaiste and member of the European Parliament. Frances is a Senior Advisor with Teneo and is regarded as one of Ireland and Europe's most accomplished political figures. In our conversation, Frances reflects on her political career, her early years as a social worker, and her continued advocacy for women in public life. We discuss different leadership styles, navigating setbacks, and developing resilience through the highs and lows of life in politics. Hope you enjoy. Frances, so great to have you on the series. Thanks for joining us today. I think it's always challenging when someone has had as storied a career as you've had, where to begin. So I'm going to work in reverse, and I'm going to look at late last year where we had a new president sworn into office, and when nominees were being suggested, your name was very much considered as a potential Fine Gael nominee, but you chose not to put your hat in the ring. I guess from my perspective, I've gotten to know you a little bit and listened to you over the last 5 or 6 months and been so impressed with what I've heard. It's felt very presidential. I know the two Marys and I know Michael D a little bit. And all of the hallmarks of what has been great about their presidential campaigns and experiences, it feels as though you would have fit into that remit incredibly well. So my question is, why not?
Well, talk about going in at the deep end, Brian, or the most recent. Yeah. I mean, it's a compliment to be asked that question, or for people to think that you would have been suitable, are suitable for a role like that. And it was a role I was always interested in, actually, and I have great respect for it. And I think there's great potential in the role. I've always felt that. I'm not one of these people who dismiss the role of president. So when it came to making a decision about it, obviously, I mean, even today in the hairdressers, a woman said to me, "Why aren't you up in the park?" And you're kind of sort of, as if it's something you kind of carelessly decided. And obviously it was something I gave a great deal of thought to. You'd have to, if there was a possibility being considered for it. And I think it comes down to, like, when you're making any big decisions in life, there's always a lot of different factors, aren't there? Whether you take on a new job, whether you make life-changing decisions. And you've so many factors to consider. And I suppose the range of factors at this point in my life made me think that it was not the right time for me. There was a time when it might have been, but, life moves on, you do different things. I would sort of put it down to age and stage. Plus, I had to assess my chances of winning it as well. I had to take a really good look at whether I thought I would win and whether a Fine Gael candidate would win. And I think taking all of that into account, I'd also been through a very tough time in 2017 with the media, with politics, and I'd built up my resilience after that. And I thought, do I want to put myself and my family through that sort of a campaign? But I didn't lack courage in terms of taking that on. But when I considered all of the other factors, I made that decision. So I do feel a bit of a loss around it, but at the same time, I feel it was the right decision.
Did you not think that you were capable of winning it?
I wasn't sure that the public wanted the same person representing parties that were in government and in the presidency. That's what I thought, and I was proved right about that. I think they want something different too. If Fine Gael had been in opposition, I think it was more likely. So, these are calls. You never know the answer to these questions. But I think I hope I've explained it. It's not something not a decision you take lightly or carelessly, but I had to be quite realistic about it at this stage.
I think maybe people felt as though you'd teased us with leaving your role as an MEP in the summer of 24, and it was prime for a year later.
Well, as I say, it's a compliment to be considered for it. And there was a loss in making that decision, but there were also gains, and there was an alternative life. And it was, I made quite, I think, a realistic decision. I thought about it quite carefully. You have to when you're at least even being considered. And people say it to me all the time and did say it to me. But, I wouldn't be grandiose about it at all. I think it's a very tough campaign. It's a hard campaign to win, particularly when your party is in government.
I mentioned you left your role as an MEP a couple of years ago now, nearly. So what's taking up most of your time now since then?
Well, right now, Ursula von der Leyen, who I really admire hugely for her leadership in the European Parliament, in the European institutions, the Commission and so on, she's had incredible things to deal with, COVID, the wars and so on. What's taking up my time? She appointed me as an advisor to the G7 on equality. And France has the presidency now starting this January. And I'm doing some work on equality at that G7 level. I'm doing a lot of work on women who are being trafficked into Ireland and internationally with an organisation called Ruhama. I'm chairing a small company that provides care, elder care, home care, because care has been a big feature of the work I've done in Europe. I got the first care strategy implemented at a European level and a few other bits and pieces, but a bit more time, a bit more private time now as well. But a year and a half on, I've kind of got the mix that I like and it's working out. And I'm obviously still involved, good political friends, so I stay involved with them. So I stay very interested in politics.
Let's bring you back to the beginning then. So I don't know if everybody would know that you were a social worker before you became a politician. You chaired the National Council for Women in Ireland. And then I'm trying to understand what the catalyst was for you to decide to get into the political arena, and how did those early career experiences shape the type of politician?
Oh yeah, they shaped me hugely. I was a very shy teenager. I was very shy until I went to university. I never kind of sought leadership positions or anything like that. I did social work. I did a social science degree. I got married and the two of us went to live in London. We did 7 years in London. I worked as a social worker. I did further training. I worked with the migrant communities in the UK. I worked with a lot of West Indians, Nigerians. I worked with a lot of older people, getting services into them. I worked with teenagers who wouldn't go to school, who had, huge parental problems. So I got a great experience there. And then I became a senior social worker there and I specialised in working with families. And we did a lot of second opinion cases. I worked with a very famous guy called Sir Michael Rutter. And I was the social worker on his team. We worked with autistic cases, children who had autism, ADHD, second opinions, that. So I loved all of that. And then I had my first child in London, Owen. And I think it was when my first child was born. And a little bit before that, before I went to London, I'd gone along to a few meetings in Dublin that had kind of, my interest kind of grew on equality issues. But it was kind of a slow burn. I wasn't an activist or I wasn't in Young Fine Gael or Young anything,
Did you have political interests as a teenager?
No, not at all. Not at all. I'm not like, as I said, I'm not like Leo Varadkar who decided to be a Taoiseach at 15. And they always think I'm having a go at him when I say that. Mine was a slow burn. I was thrilled to be, not to mind being a minister. I remember the day I was elected into Dáil Éireann. I had got involved in equality issues, and I'll tell you how I got involved in that. But I'd read a lot. I was sort of very interested in feminism. I am a feminist. And I'd been influenced. And when I came back to Ireland, I got involved with the Women's Political Association. But it was just because we were doing really interesting things. We were having international conferences here, bringing over American politicians, talking about the environment, all of the issues that actually now are kind of mainstream, we were working on, and the same in the Women's Council. And when my son was born, I was very interested in women's voices in maternity care. It wasn't a big issue then, but I was very keen on breastfeeding. I was very keen on, women having a say in how the births were handled. And that was like so hard. And I got involved with a little organisation in London called the National Childbirth Trust, just with local women kind of talking about these things. When I came back to Ireland, I set up a group like that in my local area. And then I went along to a meeting, the WPA, Women's Political Association, were having, and I got interested. But my social work drove me. And all of what I learned in my social work, amazingly, when I was Minister for Children, Minister for Justice, it informed me. When I did the children's rights referendum, it informed me. Working with families in Ballymun for 10 years, that informed legal aid, the work I did, and all sorts of things. So, You never know in your career, I think. And this is something when you're at, my stage and my age, you see how, I think do what you really enjoy and keep working hard. And you move from one area to another. And it's amazing then. You look back and you say, oh my God, what I did as a student in UCD on free legal aid. I'm a minister for justice. But I was not one of these people with I want to be minister, I want to be Taoiseach, I want to be anything. I mean, the day I went into Leinster House, I started to tell you that. I just thought, God, this is amazing. I'm going to get paid for it as well. People think people go into politics for the money, but most people are interested in public service, actually, from my experience.
So what are the traits you need to possess to be an effective politician?
Well, it's kind of, you see, it's a bit like business in a sense. You're dealing with so many different arenas. First of all, you have to get elected. You have to reach out to all the people in the constituency. You have to negotiate your political party. Then, once you do get elected, you have to negotiate the wider system. That's kind of later on. But, your question was what makes a successful politician,
What traits do you need?
Oh, the traits. Well, you need persistence. I think I did 12 elections. I lost 3. I mean, people only think of
more than 3, are you sure? Yeah.
People only think of your successes, Brian. I always remember a really successful manager saying, people think that I won every match I was in, but actually, I had a lot of losses. I lost 3. Now, what I saw in Leinster House, an awful lot of people give up. I think you need persistence. You need to love it. You need to be motivated. I think you need to have values. Because when you go through tough times, it's like I believed in equality. I believed in human rights. I believed in social issues and equality. Both my parents came from working class backgrounds. They got the opportunities. My father went into the army. He got the opportunities that this state offered in the 40s. So equality really matters to a society. And of course, from a business point of view, it matters because you make more profit. If you have more diversity and integration of diverse opinions and so on, that's well proven. Whether it's women or race, ethnicity, whatever, you get so much better results. So, you need all those traits and you need relationship ability. You have to relate to like in business, you have to relate at so many different levels. You have to have a team around you. You have to build a team. And from the very beginning, you have to have a team. You don't do it on your own. You need the people who run the constituency with you. You need to recruit people because, you have to be able to count in politics, really important. I lost a convention once by 1 vote. I mean, you've got to have members who will support you. So there's a very wide network in the same way as business and shareholders and all the people, your customers. There's the same network in politics and you have to activate that network. And it's very enjoyable if you like the work. I think my social worker curiosity and work is very similar to politics because you're looking at social problems, you're intervening, you know what's happening in the community probably before a lot of people. The arc of a social issue goes like that. Well, you're in at the early stages and you know that whether it's the water issue or it's the parking or the local constituency issues or whether it's the national, you get a really good sense. It's a real privilege. I mean, I love canvassing. When you knock on a door and somebody opens the door and they tell you all about their lives. Now, some people hate it, and they couldn't bear it. But, I just like it. And I've never lost that liking for it.
Is there good teamship in politics? Because if you look from the outside in, when a political party leader makes a faux pas or an error of some shape or form, it feels as though there's never too many hiding in the background.
It's a very good question. Richard Bruton used to talk about being a sole trader in politics. At one level, you're a sole trader because the enemy is the person trying to get elected with you or to take you out. When I got elected first, I was thrilled. It was so very new to me, a very short campaign. And I'd been doing a lot of media beforehand as chair of the Women's Council. So I did very well. And Frances Fitzgerald came up to me and he was miserable. And he said, poor Joe. And Joe was the person who'd had the seat before me, who didn't get elected. And here was I thinking I was great getting elected, but he wanted the two of us elected rightly. And that was my first lesson. But it's a sole trader at one level. And on the other hand, you can't function without really getting the system. I guess like a team, like what you've been, unless you have the team around you, you won't succeed. If I wanted to bring in legislation to the Dáil, which I did many, many times, I was dependent on the relationship my team had with the people organising the Dáil. And we were very good at that, getting our legislation through. You know, you'd have to link with the Attorney General's office, you'd have to link all over the place to move the legislation through. You know, you often hear about those criticisms of delays in legislation. It's the skill in getting it through and networking. And I think I'm a good networker, and I've got better. But whether people are supportive or not, it's hard to describe the friendships you have in politics as the same as the friendships you have outside. It's Michael Noonan once said to me, it's about shifting alliances. And I think that's what you're referring to when you ask me the question about, you know, when you hear somebody in trouble, do people rally around you? Well, you know your friends in politics when you're in trouble, and who rallies around, who stays silent. And the same applies to people outside. People are very reluctant to intervene in politics when somebody's in trouble. The business community goes away, everybody goes silent. Even the women's groups go silent because they find it too tricky to intervene in politics, rightly, in some ways.
You mentioned legislation. You've been involved in some really significant social and legislative change in modern Ireland, the children's rights referendum, marriage equality. So when you reflect on them, which of those changes do you really enjoy and look back and think it was a job extremely well done?
I've got great satisfaction from politics, particularly all the way along, actually, but particularly being a minister in a government with a majority. That helps a lot because you could get legislation through the Dáil. You had the majority to get it through. That period under Enda Kenny was particularly satisfying in terms of the range of work that we were able to do. The support you got, talking about team, I got fantastic support from Enda Kenny, from the team. The children's rights referendum was very important to me because of my background. I've explained that to you. And it was putting children's rights in the referendum. It wasn't saying families only have rights. It was saying individuals have rights. And that was great. We had a Supreme Court challenge to it, which took 2 years. But the day I heard that had gone through and that it's in the Constitution now, that children's voices should be heard and their best interests considered, that was brilliant. But I think marriage equality was the one that really, the day I did the final legislation on that in the Senate, and we had a group in, the activists, and we got the legislation through the Dáil, and then we were going to the people. And the day, that wonderful day in May, when the result was announced, I mean, that was obviously a huge team effort by the whole of Ireland, but to have been the minister who brought the memo to government, who did the legislation in the Dáil, who had to, represent it. But it was a partnership with the NGOs, with the very brave, the fathers, the brothers. And I know how much people have suffered in Ireland by exclusion. I think exclusion is the worst thing in the world for anyone. I think when you exclude people, you destroy. Whether it's in business or, on boards, exclusion is the worst. And I think, the LGBTQI plus community in Ireland had felt so excluded. So that was an absolute hype. And we were all delighted. I mean, the country was delighted. And you look at where we're at now with the backlash, but it was a great moment, But there were other pieces of legislation, around child and family rights, the sexual offences, criminalising the purchase of sexual services. I was very satisfied with that because I think this is an area and we don't talk about it all, prostitution and pornography. We see the discussion now about children. And that was important legislation. Long way to go in that area yet. But I think the legislation was the right thing to do.
You mentioned earlier America, and listen, there's no doubt there's big political fragmentation at the moment. I think Bob Dylan got it right when he said the times they are a-changing. That said, it feels like a difficult time to be in government at the moment.
It is.
How would you assess, closer to home, how would you assess some of the challenges that Ireland is overseeing with, particularly with housing and healthcare and energy and costs of living that are that kind of remain critical issues. What's your take on
You know,
it? How would you say that from a governmental point of view, we've handled that in recent times?
You see, it's a tricky one. I mean, a lot of people won't say this, but actually, you know, if our economy wasn't going the way it is, we wouldn't have those infrastructure problems, okay? I see countries where the economies are very poor. They're not developing. We have a very, very fast-growing economy, which everybody wants in many ways because they want the money to invest in social services. They want the jobs, the tens of thousands of jobs that have been created. Nobody's complaining about that. But then the challenge on the infrastructure side is huge because of the growing economy, because of so many people coming to work here, because of the foreign direct investment. Having said that, we should be better at managing the barriers and getting the houses up more quickly, dealing with the planning. I've heard some people say, what we have in Ireland is too much democracy. Now, I don't agree with that. But the very fact that, you know, you can object here, there and everywhere, and they're trying to change that now. We've been a bit too slow about getting on top of this. And I think Leo said, you know, when we had the terrible times and I was making cutbacks of 10% in the Department of Children in 2011, we didn't recover quickly enough. So there is that gap. And the public will have no patience with any government if it doesn't get on top of this issue.
It's almost 20 years since the crisis. Yeah, we're coming...
15 anyway.
Yeah, we're 2008. Okay.
Yes.
Go
back to 2008.
Beginning of it, okay? So we're only a couple of years away from it, but it just doesn't feel, certainly in the last 10 years, that a huge amount, particularly housing. I'm a parent of 3 children. You kind of wonder where your kids are going to live.
I mean,
are they going to be renters? Will they be able to afford rent?
Yeah. Well, you know, the other thing, Brian, just to put that in a different context, every city in Europe is facing the exact same. Nobody can buy in London. Nobody can buy in Berlin now. Berlin used to be okay. Madrid. Like, this is universal as we move towards cities, urban society, housing is one of the big social issues right across Europe. Who has a right to housing? You know, who should fund it? When do you have a right to housing? We've never had that discussion in Ireland. Who is actually entitled to it? Everybody has a right to shelter, yes. What does that actually mean? You have the huge migration flows. You know, we never thought we'd be dealing with, 120,000 Ukrainians, going back to this the dreadful war, the geopolitical conflicts. I mean, I don't make excuses for government. I think it is a shame, what's happened in relation to housing. I think it's very depressing, for a friend of one of my 3 sons, a friend of one of my sons said the other day, I'm leaving, this government doesn't care about housing for young people. It's not true. It is not true. Quite a lot has been done, but you can never get across what has been done because it's never enough. But there are very good plans in there now. I think it is a total priority. It was a priority in the election. So I hope we can accelerate all those infrastructural issues. That is definitely the plan and the priority at the moment. So let's hope in the next 5 years we can really get on top of these.
Yeah. You mentioned security and defence there a while ago, and there's no doubt they're critical issues. What does that mean for Ireland and Europe? And if you were in government, how would you be thinking about those issues?
You see, neutrality is not about being neutral about things. We're not neutral about our values. We know what side we're on in relation to Ukraine and Russia. So I think that neutrality is being redefined all the time for Ireland. It basically means we're not going to take part in military, campaigns, but we're going to give money to help the military campaigns. We have done that in Ukraine. And there's an argument there. I think you have to know what side you're on these days. I think you really do. Are we aligned with Europe and European values? Or are we aligned somewhere else? Unknown. So
what is the answer to that?
I think the answer is we are aligned with Europe. And I think, we are depending, it's kind of false, we're depending on the UK and America to defend us. And
so
yes,
have we not left ourselves very vulnerable?
Well, there's the argument would be that, neutrality, there's a role for neutrality in the world. You've seen Finland, you see Sweden, you see them all, deciding what side they're on. You see Finland hugely concerned about its borders. So I think there's a clarity coming into the debate in Ireland and a realism that wasn't there before because of world events.